I never imagined that a simple act of chivalry in the rain would dismantle a night built on expectation and deliver a moment of pure, stunned fate. This is the story of a soaked stranger, a blind date, and the single umbrella that connected them before they ever knew each other's names. A story about missed signals, perfect timing, and the beautiful, ironic chaos that unfolds when you help someone without seeing their face. But to understand the full weight of that restaurant entrance, you need to know about the two lonely paths that converged in that storm. Alex was a man who believed romance was a transaction of profiles and polite texts. Sam had given up on dating apps entirely, convinced real connection was extinct. Their blind date was a last, reluctant concession to hopeful friends. So when Alex offered his umbrella to a soaked woman he never saw clearly, and Sam accepted it from a gentleman whose face was hidden by rain and shadow, neither could have prepared for the question that would soon hang between them. What happens when fate intervenes between your expectations and the person standing right in front of you? Alex's life ran on spreadsheets long before he applied the same logic to love. At 32, he was a structural engineer who believed the world and people operated on predictable, manageable forces. His foray into online dating was, therefore, a clinical exercise. He maintained a detailed spreadsheet, pros and cons, compatibility percentages based on profile keywords, response time analytics. His last three first dates had scored a 72, an 81, and a disappointing 65% on his predefined matrix. Samantha, or Sam as her profile stated, was an 88, a graphic designer with a seemingly low-drama lifestyle, an appreciation for indie bookstores, and a dog named after a philosopher. Their text exchange had been pleasantly efficient, culminating in a plan to meet at 8 p.m. at the Gilded Elm, a restaurant chosen for its neutral territory and above-average dessert menu. Sam, at 29, approached the same evening from a pole of opposite energy. Her dating app profiles were a graveyard of expired conversations and one-word replies. She had deleted them all 6 weeks prior in a moment of clarity that felt more like defeat. The constant performance of curated selfies and witty bios had become psychologically draining, a phenomenon documented by researchers who note the emotional labor of maintaining a marketable self in digital romance. Her best friend, Chloe, had set up this blind date as an intervention. His name is Alex. He's a friend of Mark's from college. He builds bridges or something, and he's supposedly not a psychopath, Chloe had pleaded. Just one dinner, a real person, in the real world. Sam's agreement was less about hope and more about appeasing a friend whose concern had become a constant, gentle pressure. The rain began as a misty suggestion that afternoon, thickening into a persistent, cold downpour by early evening. For Alex, this was a variable. He factored in an extra 15 minutes for traffic, selected a dark wool coat rated for water resistance, and left his apartment at 7:15, precisely on schedule. His mind was on the potential outcomes, running probabilistic scenarios. A successful date could lead to a second, scheduled perhaps for next Friday. Compatibility over 60% for 3 consecutive dates might indicate long-term potential. He did not consider the rain romantic. It was an environmental condition to be managed. For Sam, the rain felt like a pathetic fallacy, the world mirroring her dampened mood. She had almost texted Chloe to cancel 3 times. Each time she remembered the quiet loneliness of her apartment on a Saturday night, the way her dog would look at her as if sensing the hollow space where connection should be. She chose a simple dark dress, applied a swipe of lipstick out of principle rather than excitement, and called a rideshare. The driver got lost, adding a layer of soggy frustration. She arrived at the Gilded Elm at 7:58, flustered and slightly damp from the sprint from the curb to the awning. She paused there, under the slight shelter, rummaging in her bag to check her phone. A message from Chloe: "He's tall, dark hair, blue coat I think, don't overthink it." It was at that exact moment, as she looked up from her screen, that the first twist of fate occurred, invisible to her. Alex's car pulled up to the valet stand 30 feet away. As he stepped out, he immediately registered the woman standing under the awning, shoulders hunched against the spray, clearly without an umbrella. His action was not born from romantic impulse, but from a deeply ingrained, almost algorithmic protocol of courtesy. Help if you can. Efficiency. Solve the problem. He walked over, tapped her lightly on the shoulder, and extended his folded umbrella. "Here," he said, his voice raised slightly over the drumming rain. "You look like you need this more than I do." Sam turned, startled. The scene was a blur of wet darkness and golden light from the restaurant windows. She saw a man's hand offering an umbrella, the sleeve of a dark coat, droplets on leather gloves. Her own gloves were somewhere at the bottom of her bag. "Oh, I couldn't," she began automatically, but he was already pressing the handle into her bare hand. "Really, it's fine. I'm just going inside," he said, offering a brief, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes before turning away. He had a date to get to, and he was now 2 minutes behind schedule. He strode toward the restaurant entrance, the rain immediately plastering his dark hair to his forehead and soaking into the shoulders of his supposedly water-resistant coat. Sam stood holding the umbrella, a strange warmth cutting through the chill. It was a simple black, compact umbrella, but the gesture, from a complete stranger, felt disproportionately significant in a world of ghosting and breadcrumbing. It felt human. She unfurled it, a small dry canopy clicking into place above her. She took a deep breath, the scent of wet wool and city rain filling the space, and turned to follow the path he had taken. She entered the Gilded Elm, the warmth and noise of the crowded restaurant enveloping her. She closed the umbrella, shaking it slightly, and approached the host's stand. "I'm meeting someone," she said, "a reservation under Alex." The host smiled. "Right this way, he just arrived." He led her through the maze of tables draped in white linen, the air rich with the smell of garlic and seared steak. Sam's eyes scanned the room, nerves fluttering, tall, dark hair, blue coat. She saw a man fitting that description at a corner table, facing away, his hair visibly wet. She smoothed her dress, preparing her introductory smile. The host stopped at the table. "Your guest, sir." The man stood up, turning to greet her. It was the same man from under the awning. His blue coat was draped over the back of his chair, darkened with rain. His hair was still damp. Their eyes met, and in that suspended second, a silent, electric circuit of recognition was completed. Sam's gaze dropped to the closed, black umbrella she still held in her hand, then back to his stunned face. His own eyes widened, traveling from her face to the umbrella, a mirror of her own realization. The host, oblivious, melted away. They were left standing in the buzz of the restaurant, two strangers connected by a single, sodden, symbolic object, with an entire evening of awkward, predetermined small talk suddenly rendered impossibly, profoundly strange. The script was gone. All that remained was the downpour outside and the dizzying truth inside. Their first act of kindness had been for each other. Silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was acoustically dense, a vacuum that swallowed the restaurant's chatter. Alex's brain, a machine built for load calculations and stress tests, experienced a critical system error. The variable he had not factored, the one in several million chance that the random act of courtesy and the prearranged romantic interview would involve the same person, had just occurred. His internal spreadsheet froze. Sam's mind, meanwhile, was a cascade of conflicting signals. The kind stranger was the date. The date was the kind stranger. The two categories, which her psyche had filed in completely separate drawers, had violently collided. "You," she finally said, the word barely a whisper. "You," he echoed, equally stunned. A waiter materialized, breaking the spell. "Can I start you with some drinks?" They sat down simultaneously, a reflexive movement of pure social survival. Alex watched as Sam carefully propped the damp, closed umbrella against the empty chair beside her. It sat there like a third guest, a silent witness to the collapsed timeline. He became acutely aware of his own damp shirt collar, the cool cling of wet fabric. This was not part of the protocol. Sam ordered a glass of Cabernet. Alex, his thoughts still rebooting, asked for a whiskey neat. As the waiter left, they were alone again in their bubble of surrealism. "So," Alex began, his engineer's mind latching onto process as a life raft. "This is statistically improbable." A laugh burst from Sam, sharp and surprised. "That's one way to put it." She looked at him, really looked, seeing past the rain-soaked hair to the man beneath. He had kind eyes, she noted, even if they currently looked like they were performing rapid mental calculations. "Thank you for the umbrella. I was really getting drenched." "It was the logical thing to do," Alex replied, then immediately winced at how cold it sounded. I mean, you were there, it was raining, I had one, it wasn't a big deal. But even as he said it, they both knew it was now an enormous deal. The drinks arrived, providing a momentary distraction. They clinked glasses, the gesture feeling absurdly formal. To not drowning, Sam said, a wry smile touching her lips. To dry land, Alex responded, and they both took a fortifying sip. The initial shock began to thaw into a prickly, fascinated curiosity. They had bypassed the standard first date script, the "what do you do, where are you from" opener, and catapulted straight into a shared, bizarre experience. They decided, by unspoken agreement, to pretend to start over. "I'm Alex," he said, extending a hand across the table. "Sam," she said, shaking it. His hand was warm, dry now, firm. "It's nice to meet you." The irony of the statement hung between them, delicious and strange. They ordered food, the menu a safe topic. Over appetizers, they began the traditional exchange of biographical data, but every answer was now filtered through the lens of the umbrella. When Alex mentioned he was an engineer, Sam nodded. That tracks. The efficient umbrella deployment. When Sam said she was a graphic designer, Alex said, "So you appreciate functional design, like a compact umbrella mechanism." They were teasing, but it was a gentle tease, a way of circling the elephant in the room without directly confronting its sheer size. The conversation began to flow, surprisingly easy. The shared secret created a shortcut to intimacy. They talked about their reasons for being there, Alex's spreadsheets, Sam's dating app fatigue. He confessed his analytical approach, bracing for judgment. To his surprise, Sam didn't look disgusted. She looked intrigued. "So I was just a row in a spreadsheet?" she asked, not accusatory, but genuinely curious. "Column B primarily," Alex admitted, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "But your appreciation for indie bookstores metric was particularly strong." She laughed again, and this time it was warmer. "And what's my score now, post-Umbrella Gate?" Alex looked at her genuine smile, at the intelligent light in her eyes that had been missing from her carefully curated profile photos. "The spreadsheet," he said slowly, "has encountered a fatal error. It cannot compute." This was the first major pivot. The system he relied on had broken down. He couldn't categorize this. He couldn't score the dizzying, illogical warmth he felt when she laughed. The failure of his model should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like a window opening. Sam, for her part, felt her own defensive cynicism beginning to crack. This man wasn't the emotionally stunted robot his method suggested. There was an awkward sincerity to him. He had given his umbrella to a stranger, in the rain, while on his way to a date. That wasn't logic. That was instinctive decency, a quality her curated online matches had never displayed so transparently. As they shared a dessert, one dessert with two forks, another unplanned deviation from Alex's imagined script, the conversation deepened. They moved beyond resumes. Sam talked about the loneliness of freelance work, the silence of her apartment that sometimes felt like a physical presence. Alex spoke about the pressure of his projects, the weight of responsibility when your calculations hold up literal bridges, and how that weight had seeped into his personal life, making risk feel like a structural flaw. "So you try to engineer the risk out of romance," Sam said softly. "Yes," Alex admitted, "but it turns out people aren't bridges. The load-bearing calculations are different." Outside, the rain continued its steady percussion against the window. The umbrella, leaning against the chair, seemed to pulse with significance. It was no longer just an object. It was the first chapter of their story, written before they knew they were characters in the same book. Then came the second pivot, the escalation. Alex's phone buzzed on the table. A calendar notification lit up the screen. It was for 9:45 p.m., and the subject line was clear: post-date analysis and next steps draft. Sam's eyes flicked to the screen, the easy warmth that had built between them chilled by several degrees. The reality of his system, so bluntly displayed, was a splash of cold water. Alex snatched up the phone, his face flooding with mortification. "That's an automated thing," he stammered, a pathetic and obvious lie. The spell was broken. The cozy bubble popped. Sam leaned back in her chair, her arms folding across her chest. The Sam who had given up on dating apps resurfaced, armored and skeptical. Right, an analysis of this, she gestured between them. Sam, it's not what it looks like. It looks like you have a meeting scheduled to dissect our dinner while we're still having it. What's the verdict so far? Am I exceeding expectations? Should we move to phase 2? Her words were sharp, laced with a hurt she hadn't expected to feel. The whiplash was severe, from feeling a unique, genuine connection to being reminded she was a data point. This was the exact emotional whiplash she had sought to escape by deleting the apps. Alex was floundering. The system is flawed. I see that now. Tonight has been an outlier in every possible sense. He was trying to use his language to explain, but it was only digging the hole deeper. An outlier, Sam repeated flatly. Not a person, an outlier. She signaled for the check. The wait was over. The waiter brought the bill. They went through the motions of splitting it, a transaction that now felt tragically symbolic. The silence returned, heavier this time, freighted with disappointment. Alex's mind raced, but no calculation offered a solution. He had optimized for efficiency and control, and in doing so, he had likely ruined the most genuinely interesting thing that had happened to him in years. They stood to leave. The rain was still falling. Sam picked up the umbrella, holding it out to him. Here, you'll need this. He looked at it, then at her. You keep it, please. I don't want it, she said, and the finality in her voice was a door slamming shut. She set it back on the chair, a discarded prop. She turned and walked toward the exit, pulling her coat tight around her. Alex stood frozen for a moment, staring at the abandoned umbrella. Then, instinct overrode analysis. He grabbed his coat, left cash on the table, and snatched up the umbrella. He hurried after her, reaching the restaurant's entrance vestibule just as she was about to push out into the wet night. Sam, wait. She turned, her expression guarded, expectant maybe, but ready for more clinical explanations. He didn't offer one. He simply opened the umbrella with a sharp whump. He stepped forward, under its canopy, and held it over both of them, just as he had intended to do for a stranger hours before. But now, he was looking directly into the eyes of the woman he was supposed to have met, the woman he had already helped, the woman he had just managed to hurt. The system is wrong, he said, his voice low, earnest, cutting through the noise of the rain on the awning. The spreadsheet is deleted. The only data point that matters is that I gave my umbrella to you before I knew you, and I'd do it again even if I knew this would happen, because the alternative, you walking home in this rain, is unacceptable. He took a breath, the cool air sharp in his lungs. Let me walk you to your car or your ride. No analysis, no next steps. Just let me fix this one thing. Sam looked from his earnest, rain-spattered face to the umbrella above them, the same black canopy that had started it all. Her anger wavered. This wasn't a calculated move. It was another instinctive act, messy and human. The very thing she'd been craving. The bridge between the kind stranger and the analytical date was this single, repeated gesture. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Okay, she said quietly. He stepped out into the rain together, under the shared shelter. The restaurant door swung shut behind them, sealing off the world of failed scripts and awkward dinners. They were back in the rain where they'd begun, but everything was different. The tension now wasn't about whether they would connect, but whether this fragile, unexpected bridge they stood on could hold the weight of their baggage, their fears, and the downpour of a reality that was far more chaotic and beautiful than any of Alex's spreadsheets could ever predict. The walk to Sam's rideshare was a quiet, charged negotiation under the drumming canopy. They didn't speak, the rhythmic splash of their footsteps on wet pavement filling the space where small talk had died. The umbrella created an intimate, mobile room, forcing a proximity that felt both vulnerable and safe. Sam gave clipped directions. Alex navigated, holding the umbrella at an angle that kept her completely dry while his own right shoulder gradually darkened with dampness. She noticed. He didn't mention it. When they reached the idling car, a silver sedan with its hazards blinking in the rain, Sam turned to him. The streetlight cast his face in amber and shadow. Thank you, she said again, this time the words carrying the weight of the entire bewildering evening. for the walk, and for the first umbrella. Alex simply nodded. It was the right thing to do. This time, the statement held no clinical chill. It felt like a creed. She opened the car door, the interior light illuminating her face for a second. She hesitated, one foot inside. "Good night, Alex." "Good night, Sam." She slid in and closed the door. The car pulled away, its taillights refracting in the wet street before disappearing around a corner. Alex stood alone under the umbrella, the sudden silence vast. He felt the cold seep of rain through his jacket. He felt something else, too, a hollow, restless ache where his orderly conclusions were supposed to be. He had no data to process, only the lingering image of her hesitant goodbye. He walked back to retrieve his own car from the valet, the umbrella now feeling absurdly large for one person. For Sam, the car ride was a swirl of conflicted emotion. She replayed the evening in fragments, the shocking recognition, the easy conversation over dessert, the gut punch of his phone notification, and the final, silent walk. Her friend Chloe called almost immediately. "Well, how was the bridge builder?" Sam stared out at the rain-streaked window. "It was the strangest night of my life." She recounted the umbrella story. Chloe's shriek of delight was so loud, Sam had to hold the phone away from her ear. "That's not strange, that's fate. That's a meet-cute written by the universe. Sam, this is incredible." It was also incredibly awkward. He had a calendar reminder to analyze our date, Chloe, while we were on it. The line went quiet for a moment. "Okay," Chloe conceded. "That's uniquely terrible, but Sam, he gave you his umbrella twice. The second time after you basically rejected him, the algorithm didn't tell him to do that. He did that." The words planted a seed Sam wasn't ready to water. At home, she fed her dog, changed into sweats, and tried to dismiss the night as a bizarre anecdote, but she kept glancing at her phone, half expecting, half dreading a message. None came. Alex, back in his meticulously clean apartment, did something he had never done after a first date. He actively resisted analysis. He ignored his computer. He deleted the calendar notification without reading the auto-populated notes template. He hung his wet coat to dry and propped the closed umbrella in the corner of his living room, where it stood like a minimalist sculpture of his own confusion. He poured another whiskey and sat in the dark, not calculating, just feeling. The feeling was largely one of profound regret, edged with a piercing curiosity. He had encountered a variable his system couldn't handle: authentic, messy, unoptimizable human connection, and in his panic, he had tried to force it back into a spreadsheet column. He had likely broken it. The next day passed in a strange haze for both. Sam found herself designing logos with a distracted energy, her sketches filled with accidental rain streaks and umbrella shapes. Alex stared at bridge schematics, his mind superimposing the elegant, predictable lines of tension and support with the chaotic, unpredictable tension of the previous night. The silence between them stretched, becoming its own presence. Then on Monday evening, the first move was made, not by Alex, but by the universe, or perhaps by simple, mundane coincidence, the very force their story was built upon. Sam was at the Inkwell, her favorite indie bookstore, browsing the graphic novels section. She was reaching for a volume when a familiar voice said, "I'd recommend the one next to it. The artist's use of negative space is more innovative." She turned. Alex stood there, holding a stack of books on urban design and structural engineering. He looked as surprised as she felt. No rain, no umbrella, just the two of them, surrounded by thousands of other stories. "Stalking my hobbies via spreadsheet?" Sam asked, her tone teasing but wary. A genuine smile touched his lips. "Actually, this is my Tuesday night ritual, been coming here for 3 years. The appreciation for indie bookstores wasn't a fabricated metric, it was verified data." The revelation was small, but it shifted something. His profile hadn't been a complete fiction. This was a real piece of him. The coincidence was, again, staggering. In a city of millions, their paths had crossed a third time, unplanned. "Prove it," Sam heard herself say. "Show me your favorite section." He led her to the architecture and design section, a quiet corner in the back. He knew the clerk by name. He pointed out a monograph on a bridge in Norway, his eyes alight with a passion that had been absent from his dinner conversation about dating metrics. This was his language, but spoken from the heart, not a manual. Sam listened, watching him. This was the man who had given her the umbrella. They left the bookstore together, the night clear and cold. The absence of rain felt significant. There was no external reason to share an umbrella, no convenient prop for kindness. "Can I buy you a coffee?" Alex asked, gesturing to a cafe across the street. "No analysis, I promise, just coffee." Sam considered the chasm between the man with the calendar alert and the man who geeked out over Norwegian bridge engineering. She considered the three separate threads of their connection: the kind stranger, the awkward date, the fellow book lover. Which one was real, or were they all facets of the same, complicated person? "Okay," she said, "just coffee." The coffee date was different. The specter of a romantic interview was gone, burned away by the absurdity of their history. They talked about books, about city planning, about the weird client requests Sam had to deal with. Alex asked thoughtful questions about her design process, listening in a way that felt focused, not analytical. He confessed, sheepishly, that he had indeed deleted his entire dating spreadsheet system. It was a flawed model, he said. It failed to account for catalytic variables. "Catalytic variables?" Sam asked, stirring her latte. "Events or people that change the fundamental nature of the reaction," he explained. "They can't be predicted. They can only be experienced." She smiled, like an umbrella in the rain. Exactly like an umbrella in the rain. It was a good coffee. When they parted ways on the sidewalk, there was a new, tentative understanding, a ceasefire, a possibility. This is where a normal story might blossom, but this was not a normal story. The escalation, the wait, it gets worse moment, was waiting in the wings, and it arrived via a notification of a different kind. A few days later, Sam was having lunch with Chloe. Her friend was ecstatic about the bookstore coincidence. "See, the universe is pushing you together, it's adorable." Sam's phone buzzed. It was a notification from a social media app she rarely used. A friend had tagged her in a post. The caption read, "Is this your magical umbrella, man?" Below it was a video, clearly taken from across a street at night, through a rain-smeared window. The video showed a man handing an umbrella to a woman under a restaurant awning, then walking away. It then cut to a second, much clearer clip, taken from inside what was unmistakably the Gilded Elm, showing the same man and woman sitting at a table, their faces stunned in recognition. The video had a catchy soundtrack and a filter that made it look like a romantic movie trailer. It had been uploaded to a popular real-life romance page. The view count was already in the tens of thousands. The comments were a flood of heart emojis, GOALS, and people tagging their partners. Sam's blood ran cold. She showed Chloe. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, equal parts horrified and fascinated. The video had been posted anonymously. Some stranger in the restaurant that night had witnessed the entire surreal reveal and decided to share it with the world. Their private, messy, beautiful, and awkward moment was now public property, a content snack for the internet. The umbrella, their umbrella, was now a viral prop. Sam felt violently exposed. She immediately texted Alex, "Have you seen this?" His response was instantaneous, a link to the same video. "Just saw it. A colleague sent it to me. What do we do?" Their fragile nascent connection was now under a microscope they never asked for. The pressure was no longer just internal, between their fears and hopes. It was external, societal. The narrative had been written for them, umbrella couple, #fate, best meet cute ever. The world was now watching, expecting a fairy tale. But they were still just two people who had shared three confusing encounters, one of which had ended with her walking away in disappointment. The video changed everything. It forced them into communication, but now every text felt like it might be screenshot. Would they become a commodity? Would their every subsequent interaction feel performative, feeding the beast of public expectation? The very authenticity Sam craved was now threatened by the spotlight. And Alex, who valued control and privacy, was now a meme. They agreed to meet in person at a small, out-of-the-way park, a neutral, public, but hopefully unnoticed space. The weather was overcast, threatening rain. Neither brought an umbrella. They sat on a bench, a careful foot of space between them. The video lay between them like a live wire. "This is insane," Sam said, her voice tight. "It's a total violation," Alex agreed. He looked exhausted. "My boss made a joke about it this morning. People I haven't spoken to since college are messaging me." "What do we do?" "Ignore it. Make a statement." "A statement about what?" Alex asked, frustration edging his voice. "We don't even know what this is." He gestured between them. And there it was, the core question, amplified to a scream by the public gaze. What was this? A viral moment? A genuine connection? A funny story? They had to define it now under duress. Sam hugged her knees to her chest. "I liked our coffee. I liked the bookstore. I didn't like feeling like a data point on your phone, and I really don't like feeling like a character in someone else's movie." Alex nodded slowly. "I know, and I am deeply sorry for the first thing. As for the second," he looked out at the gray sky. "We have a choice. We can let this," he pulled out his phone with the video paused on it, "define what happens, or we can ignore it completely and just figure out if we like each other when no one is watching." It was the most romantic thing he'd ever said, and it wasn't romantic at all. It was a practical assessment of forces, a load-bearing calculation for their fragile bridge. Could it hold the weight of the world's expectations? "How?" Sam asked softly. "How do we do that when the video exists, when every time we're seen together, someone might be recording?" Alex was silent for a long moment, then he turned to her, his expression resolute. "We remove the variable, we leave." Sam blinked. "What?" "Not forever, but for now. We get out of the city for a day. Somewhere no one knows us, no one has seen that video. No umbrellas, no restaurants, no audience, just a neutral test environment. To see if this," he pointed from himself to her and back, "has any structural integrity when the wind isn't howling and the cameras aren't on." It was a drastic, unexpected proposal. It was also, in its own way, perfectly logical and utterly mad. It was an engineer's solution to a viral romance problem: isolate the system from external noise to study the core components. Sam stared at him, seeing the kind stranger, the awkward date, the book lover, and now this, a man proposing an escape hatch from a circus they never bought tickets to. The world was shouting its script for them. He was offering a blank page. The sky finally released a few tentative, cold drops of rain. They both looked up, then at each other, and for the first time since the restaurant, they shared a real, simultaneous, unguarded smile. It was happening again. The rain, them, a choice. "Okay," Sam said, the word feeling like a leap from a great height. "Let's go." But as they stood up from the bench, the first drops thickening into a steady drizzle, a final, crucial revelation landed. Sam's phone buzzed. It was a direct message on the social media app from the anonymous account that had posted the video. The message contained a second video clip, one that hadn't been included in the public post. This clip was shorter, shot from a different angle in the restaurant. It showed the moment Alex's phone lit up with the post-date analysis calendar alert. It zoomed in, clearly capturing the text. The anonymous sender had added a single, cutting caption: "He was gradding you, not so sweet." The ground fell away. The escape hatch slammed shut. The worst part of their private failure was now public ammunition. The narrative had just swerved from fairy tale to cautionary tale. The kind umbrella man was now the analytical robot, and the world had the receipts. They weren't just a viral couple anymore. They were a viral controversy. And standing in the now steady rain, without an umbrella to share, they faced a new, terrifying question. Could anything real possibly grow in the toxic, flooded soil of a public scandal? The second video didn't just change the story, it weaponized their worst moment. Standing in the park rain, Sam's hands shook as she lowered her phone. The anonymous troll had successfully reframed their entire narrative. The comments on the original post were now a war zone, half defending the adorable meet-cute, the other half skewering Alex as a soulless robot and Sam as a pathetic cliché. The umbrella couple was now trending for all the wrong reasons. "We're not going anywhere," Alex said, his voice flat with a cold, clear fury Sam hadn't heard before. "We are staying right here." Their planned escape was instantly obsolete. The crisis was no longer an external pressure they could outrun. It was a stain on their digital identities. Alex's professional reputation was being questioned in engineering forums. Sam's design portfolio site saw a spike in traffic, followed by mocking comments. The violation was total. They spent the next 48 hours in a state of siege, connected only by a frantic text chain. They debated legal action, but the video was taken in public. They considered a public statement, but anything they said would be fuel. The wisest counsel, from Chloe and a couple of Alex's friends, was to say nothing, to starve the fire of oxygen, but silence felt like surrender, and it allowed the world to write their story without them. The turning point came on the third day. Sam was at her wit's end, paralyzed by the online noise. Alex called her. "I have an idea," he said, "but you have to trust me." He didn't explain over the phone. He asked her to meet him at the one place that felt like theirs before the world crashed in, the quiet architecture section of the Inkwell. When she arrived, he was already there, a determined set to his jaw. On a small reading table, he had laid out two things: a printed screenshot of the damning calendar alert and a simple, blank notebook. "We can't control the narrative," he began, "but we can live our own, so we're going to build one from scratch with real data." He opened the notebook to the first page. At the top, he wrote, "Project Umbrella, a case study in chaotic variables." Sam stared, confused. "Is this another spreadsheet?" "No," he said, "it's the opposite. It's a log, but not of metrics, of moments, the real ones." He pointed to the printed screenshot. "This is chapter 1, the error, the moment my system failed because it encountered something it couldn't measure." He then turned to a fresh page. Chapter 2, the recognition, the moment in the restaurant when a variable became a person. He looked at her, his eyes earnest. "We write it, we define it for us, not for them." It was a stunning, perfect, utterly Alex solution. He wasn't ignoring the data, he was reclaiming it. He was using his method not to optimize, but to document authenticity. He was building a bridge, not of steel, but of shared experience. Sam felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. "What's the first entry?" she asked softly. He handed her the pen. "You tell me." She took it, her fingers brushing his. She thought for a moment, then wrote, "Observation, kindness can be both instinctive and inefficient." Subject gave away primary rain defense, compromising own stated goal, arriving dry for date. Consequence, profound confusion, follow-up required. Alex read it and laughed, a real, warm sound that cut through the bookstore's quiet. "Accurate," he said. He took the pen and wrote below it, "Supplementary observation. Recipient of kindness has excellent handwriting and a superior grasp of narrative tension." They spent an hour there, passing the notebook back and forth, reframing their chaotic history into their own private, playful record. The act of writing it down, of claiming ownership, was transformative. The online storm continued to rage, but inside the notebook, they were safe. This became their ritual. They didn't hide. They went on their day trip the following weekend to a hiking trail 2 hours north. They took pictures, not for social media, but for the notebook. Alex drew a terrible sketch of a tree. Sam pressed a leaf between the pages. They talked about everything except the noise. And with every shared laugh, every quiet moment overlooking a valley, every entry in their growing log, the public scandal began to feel smaller, more distant, like a TV show they'd stopped watching. They were building something real in the quiet. The notebook filled, with coffee shop receipts, with bad movie reviews, with notes about each other's quirks, Sam's obsession with arranging pens by color, Alex's inability to cook rice. It was the antithesis of a dating spreadsheet. It was messy, anecdotal, and profoundly human. Weeks passed. The viral storm, as internet storms do, began to dissipate, replaced by the next trending oddity. The umbrella couple was forgotten by the public, but for Alex and Sam, the forgetting was a gift. They emerged from the scrutiny not as a broken scandal or a forced fairy tale, but as two people who had chosen each other deliberately in the full, unromantic glare of reality. 6 months after the rainy restaurant night, they found themselves back at the Gilded Elm. It was a deliberate choice, a reclamation. They requested the same table. The staff didn't recognize them. They ordered the same meal, but this time they shared a dessert without any awkwardness. The conversation flowed easily, a river that had carved its own course. As they finished, Alex reached into his bag. He didn't pull out a ring. He pulled out their notebook, now worn at the edges, bursting with folded mementos. He opened it to a blank page near the back. "I have a final entry to propose," he said, his voice steady but soft. He slid the pen to her. "But I need you to write it." Sam's heart hammered. She took the pen. "What's the observation?" Alex looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the kind stranger, the book lover, the man who had built a fortress of quiet moments against a world of noise. "Hypothesis," he corrected gently, "that chaotic variables, when given proper documentation and care, can form a stable, ongoing structure, that two separate systems, once joined by an unexpected catalyst, can become a single, stronger entity." He paused, "and that the most logical conclusion is to continue the experiment indefinitely, as partners." He wasn't asking her to marry him. He was asking her to co-author the next volume. It was a proposal in the only language that was truly theirs. Sam's eyes filled with tears. She looked down at the blank page, then back at him. She didn't write. Instead, she reached into her own bag and pulled out a small, flat object wrapped in simple paper. She slid it across the table to him. Puzzled, Alex unwrapped it. It was a vintage, framed anatomical illustration, but instead of a heart or a brain, it was a detailed technical diagram of a compact umbrella mechanism, every rib, stretcher, and runner meticulously labeled. At the bottom, in Sam's clean design handwriting, was a title: Fig. 1, The Catalytic Variable, a study in unexpected structural support. Alex stared at it, then at her, utterly speechless. This was the final, surprising detail. She had seen him, truly seen him, and had translated their entire story into a piece of art that spoke his language and honored their origin. It was the perfect reciprocal gesture. "Is that a yes?" he finally managed to ask. Sam smiled, taking the pen and writing a single word on the blank page of the notebook: "Confirmed." They left the restaurant that night hand in hand, under a clear, starry sky. There was no umbrella needed. They had built their own shelter. The public story had ended long ago. Their private story, documented in a messy, beautiful, ongoing log, was just beginning. The chivalrous act in the rain had cost them their anonymity and their simple expectations, but it had given them something far more valuable: a shared language, forged in the chaos, strong enough to build a life upon. They walked home, not as a viral couple, but as two people who had chosen to walk the same path, one deliberate, documented step at a time. The story of Alex and Sam, of a single umbrella in a rainstorm, is more than a charming anecdote about fate. It is a modern parable about the space between the stories we are told and the lives we actually live. We are sold narratives of algorithmic compatibility, of optimized profiles leading to seamless connections. But what Alex and Sam discovered, first in shock and then in quiet determination, is that the most meaningful connections often begin not with a perfect match, but with a messy, inconvenient, and beautifully inefficient act of kindness. The umbrella was not a magic wand. It was a simple tool that created a moment of shared vulnerability, a crack in the facade where real people could meet. Their journey from a viral spectacle to a private notebook reveals a deeper truth about our world. We live in an age of performance, where every moment can be captured, curated, and commodified. The pressure to live up to a romanticized public narrative almost shattered something fragile and real before it could even take root. But they made a choice. They chose to build their story in the margins, in the blank pages, away from the glare of the comments section. In doing so, they reclaimed the most important part of any relationship: the right to define it on their own terms, with their own language. So what does this mean for the rest of us, navigating our own searches for connection in a world of swipeable profiles and viral expectations? It suggests that perhaps the goal isn't to engineer the perfect meeting, but to remain open to the catalytic variable, the unexpected person, the unplanned gesture, the downpour that forces a different path. It asks us to consider whether we are building bridges based on authentic, documented moments, or simply performing on stages built by others. The umbrella, in the end, is just an object, but its legacy is the proof that sometimes the most solid structures are built not from flawless blueprints, but from the willingness to share shelter in a storm, to walk someone home even when the path is unclear, and to have the courage to write your own story, one honest, unoptimized entry at a time. If you found a moment of recognition in their story, if it reminded you of your own unexpected turns or quiet connections built away from the spotlight, then share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more journeys into the human stories behind the headlines, the algorithms, and the moments that remind us what truly matters. Because sometimes, the most profound changes begin with something as simple as looking up from your screen, seeing someone in the rain, and deciding to say yes.